Today we're going to be talking about resume trends for 2023 and some of the things that we just need to know, even though they're not really trends. So we're going to talk about 3 trends that I see coming for 2023, and then 3 not really trends, but you got to know it. And those are going to kind of roll into some applicant tracking system information, because I'm seeing a lot of talk about applicant tracking systems again online. Saw somebody say that, use of applicant tracking systems is increasing. So we're going to talk about that and talk about some of the myths around applicant tracking systems that might be getting in the way for you and your clients if you're writing resumes or if you're working on your own resume and trying to untangle all the applicant tracking system information that is out there. So let's start with the trends. And the first thing that I want to talk about, and I saw a post on LinkedIn that spurred this, someone was talking about trends, and my comment to them was that one of the kind of fundamental strategic changes that I'm seeing in the workplace right now is a transition from a focus on purely innovation to a focus on profitability. And what I mean by that is you see this in the tech space with tech company valuations, and venture capital funds are starting to shift away from these cool ideas, kind of that blue sky, what could happen, to companies that are profitable. So when you look at companies like Uber and some of those companies that we consider to be kind of innovative and disruptive, they aren't profitable. They aren't making money. If you look at the bottom line, they're losing money every year, and they're being backfunded by funds, by venture capital funds, by investments, and those types of things. And you're starting to see those types of investments moving away from some of those types, not huge, but away from some of that to companies that are actually demonstrating profitability or have a plan to get profitable in a shorter amount of time. Why? Because we're heading towards a possible recession. There's all that talk about recession. People are tightening the purse strings, and that includes kind of these bigger companies. You see layoffs at Apple, at Walmart, a tech space, non-tech space. Also seeing some contraction because of supply chain issues. So supply chain issues have been around for a while. Now they're starting to really make a difference in some of these businesses. Car companies laying off, like I said, Walmart laying off, because the supply chain has tightened to the point, and they thought maybe it was going to fix itself after places got online after COVID, but you're still seeing a lot of COVID disruption in places like China. And of course, the war in Europe and the Ukraine is causing supply chain disruption as well. So companies are moving towards profitability, efficiency, and even if our client works in an innovative space, we want to have them talking about how they meet that bottom line. Of course, we're always talking about top line results and revenue and growth. You also want to make sure you're talking about that efficiency, profitability. How are people contributing to that as well? Because the business mindset has really shifted more in that direction recently across industries globally. So if you're working with your clients, you want to make sure that you're focused on accomplishments, which we'll talk about here in a minute, because that's one of our, yes, you got to have that if it's not a trend. It's been around for a long time. But now the types of accomplishments you want to make sure you're highlighting really focused on that profitability, efficiency. How are people working and getting things to happen, even though there might be some of these challenges? Even better if your clients worked on supply chain challenges or overcome that, created solutions for some of that, because most companies are experiencing something around that at this time. So that's the first trend. The second trend is an emotional intelligence. And one of the people that commented on this post said not social skills, soft skills. And I would reframe that and say that we want to be showing people's emotional intelligence. It really goes beyond soft skills, and it goes to that communication skills, inclusion, leading with diversity, having the communication skills to be able to work and lead effectively virtually. Those emotional intelligence skills are huge right now, and our clients need to be able to demonstrate that. The challenge with doing that on a resume is that we don't want to sound like a personal ad, right? We don't want to sound like great communication skills, easy to work with. Not going to happen. We have to have context. Why does it matter? How have you demonstrated it? And if you can tie it to value in some way for the company, the customer, whoever it might be, then it's going to even pack that stronger punch. So if your client has good presentation skills, when if they demonstrated that, what story can we tell around it? And how is that connected to value? How has that added value for the company or the culture? If they are in a leadership role, showing their diversity, inclusion, belonging, how are they creating those spaces as a leader? And of course, how are they doing that virtually? Because most companies are still doing hybrid, if not remote work. That emotional intelligence piece is huge. And we're starting to see less and less appetite for the descriptors, for the adjectives. So now you have to be able to tell that story and show that you have those skills and other skills while decreasing the amount of adjectives that you're using in the document. I don't want to hear you tell me that you're a great communicator. I want you to show it to me. They say, prove it, show it, don't tell it, whatever kind of cliche you want to say. It's really around how can you add that value by what you're talking about, tell it in a specific story or in a specific manner. Instead of describing that you are that, show me that you've done that, show me that you've been there, because that is so much stronger than just talking with those adjectives. And when I'm looking at resumes for our Academy Certified Resume Writer program, I'm always telling people, 2 adjectives here in the summary section. That's all you get, 2 or 3. And of course, that's that is overkill. That's more than you need to worry about it. But it gets us in the habit of really not falling back on those adjectives because they're just too easy and most of the time come across as pretty hollow. So if you're branding your client and that summary section is so important, you want to make their brand a combination of the statements and stories that you tell, the specifics that you draw out, not necessarily a bunch of descriptors that are describing who they are. I could be able to see who they are through the stories that you choose and the statements that you're making, not necessarily a lot of descriptors and adjectives that are describing them. And we're going to talk about applicant tracking systems today. Yes, applicant tracking systems. Thank you, Jay. Thank you, Rich. Hi, Rich. It's good to see you. Excellent. And then Jay, thank you for joining us again today. Good to see you. So applicant tracking systems, we'll get back around to that here in a second. So you've got more emotional intelligence. You've got more focus on that profitability, efficiency. Can you help me make money, not just on the top line, but solving the bottom line problems that are happening right now? And then the third trend that I will talk about is kind of this idea of shorter. Is shorter important? I'm hearing some talk about that. And this has been happening for about the last year. Tech companies, some of those startups really focused on make it short, get in here quick. Now, the thing to be aware of here is that a lot of times those startups are looking for the fresh meat, if you will, right? They're looking for young people to come in, have a lot of energy. And of course, one page makes sense for that. When you're working with someone who's more experienced, you really want to make sure you understand, are they applying for a more experienced role? Even within a startup, a one page may not be appropriate, even though we're seeing this push towards kind of a shorter document. It may not be appropriate for those higher level roles, even in the high tech startups and Silicon Valley type of environment. Know your companies, do the research, figure out what's going to make the most sense. And a lot of times I'll create those kind of mid-level to higher level clients a one-pager they can use in some situations, and then that two-pager that they can send that has more of the detail. So yeah, we're hearing some talk about shorter, even at a little bit higher level than we usually talk about it. And I'd still be careful with that because we want our clients' experience to shine through. If they're applying for an experienced role, we don't want them to come across as not experienced because we thought they needed a one-page resume. And of course, when you hear people say, oh, you got to have a one-page resume, most of the time those people are talking to younger employees, entry-level employees, who it makes sense for them to have a one-page resume. That's always one of those debates out there. And actually, at this point, I am just going to bring up. So, I've got an article that I wrote on LinkedIn a little while ago that goes through some of these challenges that we want to watch out for. So, LinkedIn, we're going to come back to the applicant tracking systems one, but I've got this 4 questions that people often debate: cover letters, how long the resume should be, all of those things. And I put some data to it. You know, I love my data. So I put some data, all of those things in this article. So I'll grab that article, I'll put it up on on screen, and you can also just get to it from my LinkedIn account and going to the articles. So let me see if I can add that real quick and get that up there for you. So the 4 old resume questions and data you need to clear the confusion. So it goes through length. Do you need cover letter? And some of the information around, what we were talking about in terms of the length. That's what we were talking about. Sorry, I lost my train of thought there. Okay, so when we are thinking about our resume and the trends, then there's some things that just are tried and true that we need to make sure we're addressing every single time. And I saw some people posting these on the trends topic that I was responding to, and just wanted to point them out as, yes, we need to do these, even though they're not new. They're new to you. Don't worry, you're here. You're at a good time, and these are important. So first thing, accomplishment focused. We talked about the additional importance of productivity and efficiency, but whatever your client's world is, whatever way they add value to that world, that's the focus you want to take. Not just the task that they did, but what did that result in? What did that lead to? What was the value of that to the company, to the customers, to the suppliers, vendors, internal? It doesn't matter who was reaping the value. You really want to get down to that. And if we like to quantify and have numbers, that isn't always possible. And that doesn't mean the mindset isn't important. So if I can't speak to a number, I still want to be focused on the value and be as specific as I can to that value. Again, remembering that I don't want a bunch of adjectives. So significantly, unless those things really add value, don't use them. Just tell me the facts. So if you increased usage of a career center, let's say, right? If you're a career center person, you increased usage of the career center. Be awesome if you had a number for that. But if you don't worry about fluffing it up with significantly increased or some of those things. Either have a number, be specific, or just leave it be, because when it stands on its own, it's actually a lot stronger than when we try to put that adjective in there that really doesn't add any value or doesn't make it any better for us. Those specifics and the value focus. How did you add value? What were some of the things that were different in a good way, in a positive way, when you left that job or because you've been on that job? It's around for a while. We've been pushing that for a while. Very important for us to still be doing. The second thing I'm going to talk about is visuals, and this is going to kind of lead into our applicant tracking system conversation, but visuals are important. There's neuroscience behind the fact that visuals help a reader move through things. That's why websites include visuals, pictures, right? Or even better, some kind of graphic that actually tells us something. This is really important for resumes. If you're going to use a graphic, it needs to add value. Why? Because it's drawing the eye away from the text. And if you have a clip art that's drawing the eye away from your accomplishments, it's ineffective. And in fact, it could be hurting your resume's performance. If you have a graphic that adds value, that shows some kind of increase or points out some kind of transformation, then you've got that value drawn to the visual, and then the person's going to go and look for the details in the actual accomplishments. So make sure those visuals are there. Make sure those visuals are there and that they are important and add to the story, not taking away from the bullets that you've written. Now, people will say, oh, applicant tracking systems, if you do a visual, it won't work. It's not true. The visual itself won't be read by the applicant tracking system. It will go through. the rest of the text will be read. So this is our challenge with visuals, is making sure that we still have the text in that describes what the visual is talking about, because the visual itself is not going to be read by the ATS. However, the visual doesn't prevent most applicant tracking systems from reading the document. And that's one of the challenges that we have is, of course, you've got multiple readers for the document. And this is my third thing that is tried and true, but we need to be aware of, that there are multiple readers for every single resume. You've got your recruiter, and recruiters tend to read by skipping to the employment section. They don't want the fluff at the top. They just want to see what's your title, what's your dates, where have you been, what have you done. Tend to skip to that employment section. You've got your hiring manager, who the recruiter has typically said this person's qualified. So they might start at that top section, really reading about who you are and want to know, what do you think is so important that you're going to put it at the top of the page, right? That you're going to highlight it. And then you've got the technology, who is reading your document perhaps before a human does. And really important that we're understanding how that technology reads the document, but also understanding all of the myths out there about applicant tracking systems that might be getting in your way. So I've got a few different resources that I'll share with you that you can go back to on that one. One is that LinkedIn, we were just looking at the LinkedIn article on trends, and I'm going to go back to LinkedIn. And I've also got that LinkedIn article on myths. And the number one myth that I see is that applicant tracking systems kick out resumes or automatically reject people. There are companies that are using it that way, but not that many. Why? Because there's still a lot of error there, and they know it. And it's kind of the recruiter's job, right? So the applicant tracking system might rank the people, so the recruiter does spend more time with the people who scored highly, but it's highly likely they're looking at every single resume before it's dismissed or rejected, because that's their job and because the systems still make mistakes. So one of the other trends that I saw someone say was that applicant tracking systems are on the rise. I have a little bit of a hard time believing that, because it's been, 5-6 years since JobScan reported that 95% of Fortune 500 companies were using applicant tracking systems. There's just not, the market's been using applicant tracking systems for years. More small companies may be getting into the market of using them, but they've been around, they've been used. What's happening to applicant tracking systems is that they're getting smarter, which actually means that we have less to worry about in terms of formatting, because they're getting smarter. They're reading for context, not just keywords. They're reading for, is this person actually qualified for the job? And so you can read through this article. I'll grab the URL and drop it in the chat as well, and just be able to share that with you. Let me see if I can add that one here. Okay, there we go. So there's a new one. So let's see. Not every bullet point needs a metric, but we do want to share results. Yes. So sharing those results. Thank you, Ayana. Yes, sharing those results, thinking about value, even if we can't quantify. And the qualitative can also add value, definitely, for sure. So when you're thinking about your resume, focus on that efficiency, cut down on those adjectives. You still want to talk about the accomplishments, and don't get too carried away with the applicant tracking system making your document look, one, outdated, and two, less readable. And that's the last resource that I want to share with you here. It's on our site for the Resume Writing Academy, is that there are some research points behind what makes an applicant tracking system work. And Dr. Cheryl Minnick does all of our research there. I'll drop this link into the chat. And this is under our articles on the website. This one's under resume trends, I believe. And then we also want to talk about how people read and the readability. I always forget which category it's under. I think it's under writing foundation. So there is data around readability and what makes something easily readable. And it comes from the resume writing world, but it also comes from marketing, right? Because we're not the only people with resumes doing this type of work. People are trying to figure out how to design a website, how to design a book, how to design anything that will increase readability. And so you can go through this page and just some of the readability science, so that when you're designing your resume, you're not doing it from, this person says this looks good, or this person says this doesn't work in applicant tracking systems, but you're just thinking about how it all works, right? So let me add this here. So this first one I'm going to add is the ATS myths, and this one, ATS myths on the Resume Writing Academy website. Cheryl did an awesome job of going through that. You've got the article and you've got her interview on the Career Confidant Radio there. And then we also have the article on readability. And I do share this one a lot because it's something that people really need to understand the neuroscience behind it, and not just what looks pretty. So Stephen, yes. So actually the federal government does not use an applicant tracking system. Nancy Siegel and I talk about that frequently. She's our federal resume expert. City, state governments may not use a applicant. Well, actually they all use an applicant tracking system. So here's one of the things that happens when people talk about applicant tracking systems. Almost every organization uses an applicant tracking system. What it does, tracks the applicants, right? Here's who came in, here's what's applying. So most governments do use an applicant tracking system, but they might not be using a resume scoring feature. So they are using a system that tracks what's come in and how are we processing it, but they may not be using the resume scoring feature. And more companies are using a resume scoring feature, although you did see a little bit of a backlash against it kind of in the 2020, 2021 frame, now that applicant numbers are, kind of at a peak and people are struggling, you are seeing people kind of coming back to talking about this resume scoring. Prioritizes applicants, helping them see, where the top of the cream of the crop might be, does not mean it's automatically rejecting. But there's two different things that really you're talking about. Applicant tracking, which just does that, tracks the applicants who applied, have we gotten back to them, etc., versus the resume scoring feature that might be added onto the software, which is why it's always important when you hear somebody talking about applicant tracking systems that you really understand what they're talking about. There's 200 systems. Most of them are customized to an individual company's needs. So if I hear somebody say this does or doesn't work in applicant tracking systems, I'm always a little bit cautious, because you really can't say that. I try to remember to say, this does work in most systems, or this may not work in many systems, because they are all so different. And the article that you have from Cheryl talks about the common denominator. So doing resume formatting that will go through most systems. And most of the things that make something readable do go through most systems. Shading, borderlines, even graphics. Remember, they're not red, but they go through. So a lot of the myths that you see out there that talk about, send in a very plain resume, that can be fine as long as it also meets these readability criteria. And the readability criteria says that borders and shading and some of those things do help the eye move through the document. Most websites that you see, right? They have subheadings, they have a border, they have something that helps you see that next section. And there's nothing different with that in resumes. Excellent. Glad that's helpful. Okay. So the other piece that I wanted to talk about here today, and of course, we've got our resume writing class coming up. So if you are a resume writer or want to improve your resume writing skills, that is coming up here. It actually starts next week, and we're excited to have that. And it's always a great time to help people improve their writing, because remember, even though we might talk about visuals and formatting, it is the writing that matters. And when you look at why someone may not be getting calls back, most of the time it has nothing to do with formatting. That's just an easy scapegoat. Most of the time it has to do with the fact that they're not matching their language to the job description. And I don't want them to spend a lot of time targeting. What I want them to do is be really focused so that from the very beginning, they're writing their resume to meet not just the keywords, but the strategic challenges that the positions they're targeting are looking for them to solve. Because when they do that, they aren't just going to have the keyword matches, although they do want to kind of check for that quickly, but they're going to actually meet the need and have the hiring manager going, yes, this is the person that I need to bring in because they've solved the problems that I need solved. And they have to start with that focus. What are the business challenges? What are the problems they're trying to solve? What value are they looking for this position to create? And then how can I speak to when I've done that in the past clearly and concisely, and yes, with the right keywords, so they get through not only the screening system, but also that recruiter who's going to be looking quickly to see, do you fit the bill? And that hiring manager that's really looking for someone that can come in tomorrow and very, not very realistically, do this tomorrow and make my life easier now. That's what they're looking for. And it takes a little bit more than focusing on the keywords to make that happen. And that's what a good writer, or if you're doing your own resume, that's what it's all about, right? Figuring out what are those key values, the key problems that you need to solve, and then writing your resume to demonstrate when you've solved those challenges, speaking to the value as much as you can, and making sure that you are really keyed in on what your industry is looking for. We talked about some general big picture things, but the more you're in key with what the industry you're targeting is looking for, the more you will come across as someone that they have to hire, right? Someone that they want to bring in tomorrow. So if there's any other resume questions or concerns or things that you would like me to cover, let me know. I'm happy to do that next week because we'll be talking about resumes again next week as we go into our resume writing class. And if you have any questions about the ACRW, be happy to answer those. Please let me know. And we'll see you next week. Thank you, everyone.